Alrighty, so I got a fun one this time. This is 10 cards that I think could break out with the release of Twilight of the Republic. Now, just a disclaimer, this is not financial advice for you. Most of these cards are not legendary. Actually, I think only one of them will be. This isn't about like which ones I think you gotta go out and buy. This is more just cards that I'm gonna be interested in brewing with in conjunction with the release of the next set. All right, so before we get going, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps out a lot. Go check out the Patreon if you haven't, if you want some more content from me. And here we go. So first, 5 honorable mentions here. Most of these cards are already playable, so I just wanted to kind of call them out, and they're in kind of the same vein. We got Admiral Ackbar here, Fallen Lightsaber, Death Trooper, Gideon Hask, and Overwhelming Barrage. I mean, interesting that Overwhelming Barrage is probably going to be even better in this next set that looks like it's going to be at least partially pushing going wide with tokens, or going wide with the purpose of exploiting tokens. And Overwhelming Barrage looks like it's going to do an absolutely amazing job washing all that away. On top of that, exploit works well with it because you'll probably be getting bigger units into play for cheaper than you are used to, enabling even bigger Overwhelming Barrages. Gideon Hask, of course, like, I mean, more tokens dying, people exploiting tokens means more triggers for Hask. Death Trooper is probably going to have more clean units to one-shot, which is something he does not do very often these days. Fallen Lightsaber, kill all the battle droids if you put this on a Force unit. And Admiral Ackbar, just the same, works well with a go-wide strategy, making him be able to kill larger units, but also himself being able to kill like battle droids on his own or clones with only one other unit in play. So I put these 5 here mostly just to call out that I think cards that may be on the rise will be cards that interact well against tokens or well with the exploit strategy in general. All right, now into the main event. Number 10, Bombing Run. So this is an extension of what we just talked about, but again, I do expect a little more units in play. I mean, that's got to be the idea of this set. Right now, Bombing Run is not a particularly effective card because it's just not very common that it's going to be killing 2 units. And this effect, not killing 2 units, makes this effect not very good. With Coordinate potentially being a mechanic that people are pushing into Constructed, potentially not. I mean, I'm not sure so much about Coordinate. I think Exploit is the stronger the mechanics, but Exploit also does require more units in play. And Bombing Run is going to do a decent job of punishing that kind of strategy, potentially. Like, you're going to set up, you're going to play a card that makes like 4 battle droid tokens with the idea to like sacrifice them all into something big, but you get Bombing Run and you kind of stall. So I think Bombing Run is going to be interesting. We know the Mace leader himself also has a flip that does 2 damage to everything that's already taken damage, so it could be set up with him for a much bigger flip turn, adding up all the way to 5 damage to everything. So yeah, I think there's a chance that Bombing Run, a card that is not seeing much play, although does look like when you read it that it would, could be on the rise. All right, number 9, the legendary on this list, and a card that is already one of the best cards in the set. It is Darth Vader, and why am I including him as a potential riser when he is already such a meta-dominant card? Well, it's because of these 6 newcomers. We got Magna Guard Wing Leader, Droid Commando, Calculating Magna Guard, General Grievous, Rune Hako, Elite P-38 Starfighter. So these are all kind of insane Vader pulls. They're really upping the power of what Darth Vader can do when he pulls out a unit. We got now in green specifically, I think a big reason this Magna Guard Wing Leader is going to be good is because right now you're not pulling very many good space units in a green deck. If you're playing a green-blue deck, forget it. Green-yellow, you do have like 7th Fleet Defender, but you now have a colored matching good unit to pull out with Vader in space, which is big. Droid Commando is a 4/3 that will have ambush if you have a separatist unit. So being able to Vader ambush into something and then pull out a 4/3 that also ambushes into something, as long as you've got a separatist. Now remember, all the droids are going to be separatists, so there is a decent amount of them. Now we got some real heavy hitters in blue. Calculating Magna Guard is a 3/4 with a when played that gives itself Sentinel. That's better than the Sentinels we pull right now with Darth Vader, like Cell Block Guard, or the green Cell Block Guard, the 3/3 Phase Trooper, right? So Magna Guard is just better. I think 3/4 is just significantly more important than 3/3 stat line. General Grievous, just gonna be probably one of the better cards in the set, just because he's a 3-cost 4/4. But wow, like Vader's gonna pull out a 4/4, just come and join me, right? That seems good. Rune Hako is a 3/2 that he pulls out that will also give something -1/-1 if something died. Now if you sequence that after Vader ambush and like potentially you ambush Vader into something, Vader dies, you can already trigger the Rune Hako if needed. If something else has died that turn, Rune Hako could shrink something before you do the Vader ambush, saving a point of damage. So that looks pretty solid. And then in yellow, the 38 Starfighter might even be a better pull than 7th Fleet Defender, because it's got a when played that deals a damage, which means bam, Vader is now pulling 6 damage on his turn instead of 5. And then, of course, the 38 Starfighter also dies into damage. So I think Vader is getting some real big help with the kind of quality of cards he can pull out from your deck. And as such, he makes this list, even though he is already a big bomb in this set, or in the previous meta. All right, number 8, Cob Vamp, a card that I know a lot of people were incredibly high on when it was first released. I also thought it was very good. I think it ended up being pretty fringe, like its type. But Exploit is good with Cob Vamp for sure. It's another unit that dies into a unit, which I think is just important in the whole Exploit mechanic. So that you don't kind of peter out. You'll be able to, like, if you play him and they kill him, you still have a unit left to exploit. If they don't kill him and you exploit him, you still got a unit left over. So I think that's just going to be really nice in general. I think Cob Vamp is going to work decently well in green exploit strategies. He might not be better than some other options, but he certainly will be in the consideration for all those strategies. And I don't have like a ton else to say. I just think it's pretty important for these strategies to have redundancy in units that kind of keep the board stable. So like all those new ones that we've seen, like the Wartime Official and the Confederate Courier, like these units that die into units, I think you're just going to need a critical mass of them so that you don't just like lose out on your whole board when your opponent plays removal and then you can't exploit anything. Like you need to be able to like be insulated a bit against that. All right, number 7, Patrolling V-Wing, another exploit candidate. This does it a little differently. Instead of adding redundancy to the battlefield, it's going to add redundancy into your hand, which I think is also important because exploit decks may end up running low on cards because basically they're using cards as resources. They are playing units and then eating those units to play bigger units. Their size is going to go down when they do that because they're kind of 2-for-1ing themselves in the process. Patrolling V-Wing, instead of giving you redundancy in like another unit being in play, it's just going to refill your hand. You can think of this card as costing 0 in a sense because exploit reduces the cost of a card by 2. And if you're eating this, then the 2 that you paid for Patrolling V-Wing was kind of an upfront cost to get a reduction later. So you're kind of like paying 0 to draw a card if you like close your eyes a little and like imagine it. That's like the perfect world scenario for a Patrolling V-Wing. I just think this card might actually be pretty decent now because of exploit. And, you know, if exploit ends up flopping completely, if the mechanic just doesn't take off because the power level isn't there or the payoffs just are too easily disrupted, maybe by bounce effects or removal, and there's just too much trouble and not worth the effort, then no, Patrolling V-Wing probably won't see play. But so far, I have hope that exploit will be a decent thing to be doing. All right, number 6, Omega, is a 2-cost 2/2 that we don't play at all anywhere, but there are a lot of new clones, like a ton of new clones in this set. I think Omega will basically always draw one as long as you put enough of these clones in your deck now. And I think that's pretty cool. A 2/2 that draws a card. I like that better than something like Mon Mothma. That's a 1/3 that draws a card. And, you know, it's not bad. It's just not bad to have a 2/2 that draws a card, especially if the clones are good. And there are some decent clones. It also, like, kind of creates cool situations with, like, 5, right? Like, 5s is a new card that whenever you play an event, you can put a clone from your discard pile at the bottom of your deck and then draw a card. So more clones, Omega finding more clones in your discard pile, more gas for 5s potentially. I don't know if 5s will end up being the power level needed because, of course, he's a 5-cost 5/5, which is, you know, very, very slow this day and age. But Omega on her own, in conjunction with more clones that we're seeing and like a go wide strategy that's like looking to play multiple units out, I think could be decent. We just need to see if like that clone strategy will work. We've got like a few clone synergy pieces in general. A lot of them are troopers too, which helps if you're doing something with the new leader Rex, because the clones you find could get buffed in the health by Rex. So yeah, I think Omega could be played a little more. All right, number 5. Here's one of the clones that Omega can find, and Ekko is another card that I think could see some more play. You know, he has decent stats, like especially if he can buff something, like it's a 4/4 that can then throw 2 experience on something. And we finally have another Ekko, which I think is very important for Ekko. Like him being able to buff himself, make a 4-cost 6/6 restore 2 is a big deal. So now we've got Ekko throwing stats at himself, but also we've got more redundancy in other places as well. And once you have enough, like 6 copies of a few different named units, right? Like they don't have to be the same card, they just have to have the same name. So like there's an extra Sabine now, so like you can play 6 Sabines in a deck. Not the best example because that's yellow and red and Ekko's green, but the point is there are more options now for you to get named units into play that share a name. This is probably going to increase even further down the line with more sets, but right now we may have enough, and I think it obviously starts with throwing 3 Ekko from Shadows and 3 Ekko from Twilight into the set. You may want to do it with Rex as well. You've got the leader and the unit version of him, so you can like flip Rex, play Ekko, throw 2 experience, like discard a Rex, put 2 experience on your leader, make him a 4/8 that's buffing the rest of your team, which is also pretty decent. So you just want to look at the critical mass. I don't think you need your whole deck to be like redundant copies of the same named units, but if you have like 3, like 6 copies of Ekko, 6 copies of this unit, 6 copies of this unit, and like all of a sudden Ekko is going to be pretty consistently throwing out 2 experience, and that could be pretty nice. Oh, and there's the other Ekko. All right, Daring Raid. So why is this here? Well, it's basically here entirely because of Mace Windu leader. We finally have a 1-cost, well, it's not 1-cost, a 2-cost deal 3, right? I think that's a pretty big deal. Like, no guarantee Mace Windu sees play, frankly. Like, I don't know. I can't predict that, but I think I'd be playing 3 Daring Raids in any Mace Windu deck that I'd be brewing right now, because being able to kill your opponent's turn 1 play with an event is awesome, and it's not really something that exists right now. Typically, you cannot kill your opponent's turn 1 play with an event unless they play a really weak unit, or you go through some work with like Tarkin Town or ambush something, right? But now, bam, this is clean. This kills like most real threats that your opponent would play on the first turn of the game. And that is huge and something I'm pretty excited for, because typically these days your opponent goes first, they play a unit. You gotta play a unit to match their unit. They typically get first action. They can attack your base if they're an aggro deck. Then you have to trade into the unit, and like they're always ahead of you. And here we can just be on parity. They can go unit. You can Daring Raid, use Mace's ability, deal 3 to that unit. Next turn, right? We're board clean. That is exciting. It's something hasn't really been possible too frequently, and I like it. It's also not going to be bad later in the game with Mace, right? Like, you can always treat this as a 2 damage deal 3. It's not going to be like quick, right? Because other than the first turn of the game, your opponent gets that action in between and may be able to attack you. So it's not like it's awesome all the time. But this, I think, opens up a lot of options in deck building. Like, hey, I don't need 10, 11 turn 1 units. Like, 3 Daring Raids is a very acceptable turn 1 play for me in this Mace Windu deck. And I can just play a few units that I like more. And I think that's pretty cool. All right, number 3, Count Dooku. Why is he here? Well, he's here because of Count Dooku Leader. Count Dooku unit is a Separatist. Count Dooku Leader gives Separatist Exploit 1. This card can cost 5 in your Count Dooku deck, and that's a pretty big deal. Like, he costs 7 right now. He sees a little bit of play sometimes in like control-y, unit-based control-y decks. He's usually not like the first choice. Those decks are usually green, so they're like playing Vaders, they're playing Mauls. Those are usually better than Dooku, although Dooku does, you know, slice space units, which is nice. But as a 5-cost unit, this is a pretty big get. Earlier in the game, it's much more likely that he'll be able to kill something relevant, and leaving behind a 5/4 shielded unit brawls really well on the ground when you're talking like turn 4 instead of turn 6. So I really like this synergy with Count Dooku with the exploit. Of course, when your leader Dooku is a unit, he can attack and give something exploit 3, so you can make this guy cost all the way down to 1 resource in that case. But for the most part, I'm excited for the fact that I can bring him out on turn 4 as long as I've done a tiny bit of work and have like a unit to sacrifice to this, right? And it doesn't even cost that extra action, right? Like, Dooku just does it. He gives the card exploit and plays it with 1 action. So bam, like, you just need that unit and you're good to go, and you get yourself a real powerhouse of a play. All right, Jobba the Hut. Now, this, I think, is the only card that I included here that I also included as a breakout candidate from set 1. I don't think I really hit on that, although Jobba was fantastic for me when playing a Cad Bane red deck. I really liked it there, but, you know, that deck was not really on top of the metagame. But there is some real exciting stuff going on with Jobba, and it starts with this card. Now there are 2 of them. So it's a trick, right? So Jobba can find it. Massive, right? Kind of the downside of the now there are 2 of them is that it 2-for-1s yourself, right? You're using a card to play a card from your hand, so you're basically playing 2 cards but getting 1. The payoff is that whatever you played costs 2 less. So now there are 2 of them is kind of a resource cheat, but it's card disadvantage. Well, Jobba kind of innately fixes that part of it, right? Because he's drawing you a card, so like, you're at a wash now. But there's so much more, and that's what Jobba curves into himself. So Jabba's a 2/8. He's incredibly sturdy, right? It's very difficult to remove Jobba the turn he's played, which means you are going to have Jobba in play next turn. And if he is your only unit, and if you're trying to pull this off, probably going to be your only unit, he's got the right types to do some real nasty stuff with this card. So you, on your 5 resource turn, can bam, throw out a Maul. You actually get, or a Jabba's Rancor. Both of them cost 7 because you have a Jobba the Hut in play. And since now there are 2 of them, actually cost 1 less because each trick costs 1 less. You actually even have a leftover resource after this play. So Jobba can turn himself, well, it doesn't turn himself into it, but he can turn this whole combo on by himself. He finds the card, and he's the enabler for the card because Underworld is such a good trait, and this is a real big powerhouse. Both the Rancor and Maul both have a when played effect as well, so they just like come in and do something massive. Either, you know, we know what Maul does. Rancor no one plays, but I think if you want redundancy in this combo, you probably need more than just Maul. And, you know, a 9/9 that deals 3 to the Jabba and 3 to one of your opponent's units seems like a decent payoff on the 5 resource turn. you look at this color combo too, and the first thing you might want to think about is Boba as well. Boba is Underworld, so he himself also turns on this Maul combo, so you don't even need the Jabba. In that case, you would, like, even if Jabba dies, you then flip Boba, you play Now There Are Two of Them, bam, you got Maul 2 turns ahead of schedule. So I think this whole package is really interesting. Now There Are Two of Them is obviously a card that is going to be pretty exciting to build around. It looks to me like it has a lot of power. It also has potential to like not quite get there, as these effects tend to sometimes like fizzle out because of their consistency. But I think Jabba definitely makes this whole package way more consistent. And the number 1 card for a breakout candidate is You're My Only Hope. And it's here because of this leader, Yoda. Yoda is a self-contained package to enable You're My Only Hope. And the last 2 cards we kind of talked about were all about resource cheating, You're My Only Hope, or like Jabba to enable the, now there are 2 of them, but You're My Only Hope. Yoda, we finally have a way to put cards from our hand back on top of our deck, which means we can stack our deck and then play You're My Only Hope. Yoda does this incredibly cleanly. All you really need to do is for something to die before you play You're My Only Hope. It can be your opponent's unit. It can be one of your own units. I think that's really key. That doesn't even have to be one of your opponent's units. You can just attack with something into something, let your own unit die, draw your card, stack your deck, and then bam, You're My Only Hope. You got your 2 resource cheat. This is not even card disadvantage because you're playing the card from the top of your deck. So you are just playing something for 5 less. That means the first place I look is like Luke Skywalker, costing 5 in this case instead of 7 because it's a 2 resource cheat. Massive. But you can do this from turn 2 on, right? The only key here is that you want to do this with unit combat. You don't want to need to play like removal from your hand first, because then you've spent resources and you're making the cheat from You're My Only Hope a little weaker. But as long as you're playing enough units that you can either trade with your opponent's stuff or just even lose one of your own units so that you can cheat out something big, this is just incredibly consistent. There's like, it's not really that much of a deck building cost to put this in your deck. You are basically, like, even if you needed to use like a removal spell first, you could still just stack your deck with something that you could afford to play off of You're My Only Hope and then do it. There is so little downside with this card and the Yoda leader that I can't imagine, like, again, like if Yoda's not good enough, if like the deck doesn't take off, then sure, we probably won't see this card. But in the same vein as like Mace with Daring Raid, but if Yoda's playable, we gotta think that this card is making the cut there. You know, you can also do some like really insane stuff because of Yoda. Like, remember, the card is free if you have 5 or less remaining HP. So late in the game, you can stack some ridiculous stuff. Like I've heard the card Endless Legions thrown around as just like, it costs 14. You just put 1 in your deck. You get to 5 and you just play Endless Legions from the top of your deck for free, and probably instantly win the game because of that, as long as, like, you know, you put some things in your resource row that were relevant for winning the game. But that's kind of like your high roll stuff. But I think even at like playing this in the fair way, whatever that means, I mean, the card is pretty unfair, but in the fair way of like, I'm just playing the Luke for 2 less, like, that's still very, very good. It's not costing you extra cards to do this. It's still just like card parity, right? And it's gonna be strong, I think. All right, that's it for today. Let me know what cards you're excited about from the previous sets that you think might rise in popularity with the next set. And yeah, until next time, take care.